Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favorite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. The gateway of India stood sentinel over Mumbai's harbour. But in the heart of the city, the monsoon had transformed the elegant Victoria Hotel into a flooded stage of isolation. Torrents raged outside, trapping the elite guests in a drama of decadence and deceit. Then Sir Reginald Thorne, the ruthless industrialist, was found poisoned in the grand ballroom, his body slumped amid shattered crystal and spilled champagne. The police whispered of accidental overdose amid the chaos of the flood. But Hercule Poirot saw a meticulously rehearsed performance. But someone among the stranded cast was playing the role of innocence while directing a symphony of revenge. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The Victoria Hotel shimmered with pure Art Deco elegance under the relentless monsoon sky. Marble floors gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers that tinkled like delicate piano notes whenever a draft slipped through. Outside, rain hammered the windows in furious sheets, turning the streets into rivers and sealing the hotel like a stage sealed for a private performance. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of sandalwood cologne, fresh hothouse lilies, and the faint smokiness of Cuban cigars still lingering from the evening. Guests glided through the grand spaces in silk evening gowns and crisp tuxedos, their movements graceful yet tense, as though each knew they were being watched. The warmth of the drawing room fire crackled invitingly, pushing back the chill that seeped from the flooded terrace beyond the French doors. Polished mahogany tables reflected the soft glow of lamps, while velvet curtains muffled the storm's roar. Sir Reginald Thorne dominated the evening as host. The British industrialist, broad-shouldered and commanding, raised his champagne glass with theatrical flourish. His fortune had been built on cotton mills, yet old whispers followed him. Negligent safety measures during a devastating flood years earlier that had drowned workers and stained his name. Tonight, he toasted enduring empires, his voice booming across the room, cigar smoke curling lazily into the perfume-scented air. Then the scream shattered everything. Lady Amelia Thorne discovered her husband first. She stood frozen in the ballroom doorway, silk gown rustling, as her cry cut sharper than the grandfather clock's chime. Sir Reginald slumped in a high-backed armchair near the velvet curtains, face contorted, eyes wide in final agony. A crystal tumbler lay shattered at his feet. The bitter reek of spilled medicine mingled with the dry sweetness of champagne. Footsteps pounded across parquet flooring. Doors opened and closed softly in panic. Hercule Poirot arrived shortly after, summoned by a desperate telegram from an old acquaintance trapped inside. He entered the lobby with measured steps, small and precise, drawing himself up to full, though modest, height. His green eyes gleamed as they swept the scene, the broken glass, the untouched coffee cooling on silver trays, the suspects already gathering like actors taking their marks. Mon ami, he murmured to Inspector Singh, touching his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. This is no accident. The stage is set for murder. Observe, the flood has trapped every player. No one leaves until the curtain falls. The cast assembled swiftly under suspicion's spotlight. Lady Amelia Thorne played the grieving widow with practiced poise. She dabbed at dry eyes with a silk handkerchief, shoulders trembling just enough, yet never quite enough. Mr. Vikram Kapoor, Thorne's Indian business partner, stood rigid in rough tweed, exuding loyalty that felt rehearsed, his hands clasped too tightly behind his back. Miss Eleanor Thorne, the daughter, he hovered near a rain-lashed window. Her soft kid gloves twisted in her lap. She avoided looking at the body, rain drumming steadily against the glass like impatient fingers. Dr. Harold Sinclair, once a rival physician ruined by Thorne's influence, paced slowly, footsteps muffled on thick carpet. His sandalwood cologne cut through the lily's sweetness. Raj, the loyal butler, moved among them with trays of strong continental coffee. His hand steady, the aroma sharp and grounding amid chaos. Each performed their assigned role: bereaved family, faithful associate, concerned guest, devoted servant. But Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head, noting every subtle cue, the averted glances, the postures held too perfectly. "Watch this performance carefully, mon ami," Poirot whispered to you, the listener. "Is it truth or theatre?" The mask slips. Did you catch how Lady Thorne's handkerchief stays perfectly dry? No tears, no smudge of mascara. He made an expressive gesture with small hands. He drawing attention like a director pointing to a spotlight. Inspector Singh, perspiring despite the chill, suggested accidental overdose. Thorne's heart medicine, carelessly mixed with champagne during the flood's distractions. Poirot shook his head firmly. Mais non. This is deliberate poison, staged with care. The little grey cells detect the rehearsal beneath the chaos. Clues surfaced slowly. An emptied vial of bitter medicine on the side table, far beyond any prescription dose. A flooded grounds making escape impossible. Hot coffee left untouched as nervous alibis were murmured. Wood smoke drifted from the fire, cold night air whispering through door cracks. "You watch with Poirot, no?" he continued softly. "You see how Mr. Kapoor's hands tremble just slightly when he swears undying loyalty." Poirot adjusted his moustache with precision, voice calm, yet commanding. "The psychology, it is everything. In this theatre of flood and fortune, someone performs revenge." As midnight approached, suspects drifted toward their rooms. Doors closed with soft clicks, echoing like scene changes in a play. Poirot remained in the drawing room, arranging objects on a low table with perfect symmetry. A saucer here, a napkin there. "The tension rises," he noted to you. "Someone will break character soon. Ask yourself, why does Miss Elena refuse even now to meet her father's dead gaze?" Chapter 2. Enter the players. The monsoon showed no mercy. The rain continued to lash the Victoria Hotel, turning every window into a blurred curtain of water, and sealing the elegant building like a theatre locked for a single inescapable performance. Inside, the breakfast room carried the comforting scent of strong continental coffee and furniture wax, undercut by the faint, lingering trace of last night's Cuban cigars. Crisp linen napkins unfolded with soft rustles. A silver spoons clinked gently against porcelain as guests tried to pretend the night before had been ordinary. Hercule Poirot chose the library for his first formal interviews. A quiet room lined with leather-bound volumes, velvet curtains drawn against the storm, and a low fire crackling steadily. The grandfather clock in the corner marked time with measured chimes, each one sounding like a cue for the next actor to step forward. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot announced softly. We begin the scenes. Let us see who remembers their lines and who forgets. Lady Amelia Thorne entered first. Her silk morning gown whispered across the parquet floor. She carried herself with the studied grace of a leading lady accustomed to applause. She settled into the wing chair opposite Poirot, accepted a cup of hot coffee, and began her performance of the grieving widow. She spoke in a low, controlled voice of her husband's difficult temperament, his long hours, his obsession with empire building. Her alibi was simple. She had retired to her room with a headache shortly after the toast, taken a powder, and slept through the tragedy. Yet when Poirot gently asked whether she had returned to the ballroom even once, her fingers tightened around the smooth porcelain cup. Observe, mon ami, Poirot murmured to you, the listener, once she had left. The performance is polished, too polished. Truth does not need to polish itself. Did you notice how quickly she changed the subject when I mentioned Raj serving late-night champagne? Mr. Vikram Kapoor followed. He wore the same rough tweed jacket from the previous evening, now slightly damp at the shoulders from a brief venture onto the covered veranda. He sat stiffly, hands folded, projecting the role of the loyal business partner. He spoke warmly of Sir Reginald's vision, of their shared dreams for modernizing the mills. But when Poirot asked about the catastrophic flood 10 years earlier, the one that drowned workers because safety measures were ignored, Kapoor's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Bravo, Poirot said after the man departed. But unconvincing. You see it, no? The careful observer will notice his knuckles turning white. Loyalty performing as calm, yet fear performs underneath. And ask yourself, why does he avoid looking directly at the portrait of Sir Reginald hanging above the mantel? Miss Eleanor Thorne came next. She wore a simple grey dress, her kid gloves still on, twisting them slowly in her lap like someone rehearsing nervousness. She played the dutiful, heartbroken daughter, eyes downcast, voice soft, but stumbled when Poirot mentioned a letter her father had received the week before. She claimed ignorance, then corrected herself. It was only business correspondence. And the grandfather clock chimed again. The missed cue hung in the air. This actor plays innocence, Poirot whispered to you. But observe the eyes. Where is the moisture of genuine sorrow? Too dry, too controlled. Dr. Harold Sinclair entered with an air of professional detachment. His sandalwood cologne arrived before he did, sharp against the scent of lilies wilting in a nearby vase. Yet he admitted the old rivalry. Sir Reginald had used influence to destroy his medical career after a disagreement tied to that same flood disaster, but insisted he had spent the critical hour smoking a cigar with Raj on the terrace. His alibi seemed solid, yet Poirot noted the way his fingers drummed once, twice, against the arm of the chair before he caught himself. Too perfect, Poirot remarked quietly. The body betrays what the mouth rehearses. If you were hiding guilt, mon ami, how would you perform innocence? Finally came Raj, the butler. He moved with the quiet precision of long service, setting a fresh pot of coffee on the low table before sitting. He performed unwavering devotion. Sir Reginald had been demanding but fair. He, Raj, had served without complaint. Yet when Poirot asked about overheard arguments in the weeks leading up to the party, arguments concerning money, blame, and that long-ago flood, Raj's voice faltered for the first time. He recovered quickly, but the tremor had been there. Every actor in this drama has a secret, Poirot confided to you. Poirot, he sees behind the masks. Watch how this one's hands remain steady on the tray. Too steady. A truly loyal servant would show some natural agitation at such a loss. Throughout the morning, small contradictions surfaced like missed cues in a dress rehearsal. Lady Amelia claimed solitude, yet Raj remembered delivering champagne to her at 11:30. Mr. A Kapoor swore the partnership was harmonious, yet a clerk in Bombay had sent urgent telegrams about disputed accounts. Miss Eleanor denied any knowledge of her father's private papers, yet a half-burned envelope had been found in the library grate. Dr. Sinclair's medical bag had been seen near the side table, where the poison vial stood. Raj, so helpful, so invisible, had been the last person to handle Sir Reginald's medicine tray. The storm outside thundered approval, rain drumming harder against the windows. Inside, silk rustled, coffee cooled, and the fire snapped like impatient fingers. The tension rises, Poirot said softly, tilting his egg-shaped head. Someone will break character soon. The stage is watching. Are you watching too, mon ami? Every actor had taken their mark. But who played truth and who played lies? Chapter 3. The First Act. The monsoon had not relented, and by late morning, the Victoria Hotel felt more like a ship adrift, cut off from the world by rising brown water that lapped at the marble steps outside. Inside the drawing room, the air was warmer, heavy with the scent of furniture wax, wilting hothouse lilies, and the faint bitter edge of yesterday's medicine still clinging to the curtains. The crystal chandelier overhead tinkled softly whenever someone passed beneath it, as though the building itself were nervous, and Hercule Poirot moved with quiet purpose. He had requested the ballroom be left untouched, except for the removal of the body. Now he stood near the velvet curtains, small hands clasped behind his back, green eyes scanning every detail. Shards of crystal still glittered on the parquet like fallen stars. A single kid glove, small, pale, clearly not Lady Amelia's size, lay half hidden beneath the side table where the poison vial had stood. Observe, mon ami, Poirot said softly to you, the listener. On this glove does not belong to the grieving widow. It plays a role not written for it. The mask slips. Did you catch how perfectly placed it seems? Too perfect? Truth does not arrange itself so neatly. He summoned Lady Amelia again. She entered wearing a dark silk afternoon dress, performing composure with the same careful precision she had used the night before. Poirot held up the glove between thumb and forefinger. Madame, this was found near your husband's chair. It is not yours. Oh, whose then? Her lips parted, closed, parted again. For a heartbeat, the performance wavered, shoulders stiffened, breath caught. Then she recovered, claiming it must belong to one of the maids who had helped clear glasses. But her voice rose half a tone. Her dry handkerchief appeared once more, dabbing at eyes that remained tearless. Watch this performance carefully. Poirot murmured to you. The grief, it is technically perfect. The shoulders shake appropriately, yet the handkerchief remains dry. The mascara does not run. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles. Lies flow smooth. He let her go, then turned to the others. Mr. Kapoor grew paler when shown the glove. Miss Elena looked away too quickly. Dr. Sinclair's drumming fingers stilled for the first time. Raj merely lowered his gaze, steady as ever. Poirot's mind drifted to a case long past. The murder aboard the Karnak on the Nile. And there a woman had played devastated widow with heartbreaking conviction. She wept on cue, clutched at railings, fainted at precisely the right moment. Yet Poirot had noticed her hands. When she reached for her smelling salts, they were rock steady. A truly shocked woman trembles. Shock is not selective. She had rehearsed every gesture before a cabin mirror. Widened eyes, quivering lip, dramatic collapse, yet forgot that genuine emotion cannot be turned on and off like stage lighting. And the little grey cells had seen what the eyes missed. The body betrays truth, even when the face lies. In the end, she had confessed, not from evidence alone, but because the performance had exhausted her. The psychology, it is everything. Here in Mumbai, Poirot reflected on the same human habit. Why do we wear masks? Fear of judgment forces one mask, greed another, love twisted into possession, yet another. In this flooded hotel, the storm outside mirrored the storm within, pressure building, cracks forming. Guilt performs innocence, but forgets the small tells. The dry eyes, the too steady hands, the glance that avoids the dead man's portrait. Society applauds a good performance, yet truth waits patiently in the wings. No actor can sustain a role forever. Fatigue sets in, the mask slips, and the little grey cells take note. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice these tells, Poirot said quietly. Ask yourself, why does this woman avoid speaking of the old flood scandal when everyone else cannot stop mentioning it? Later, he confronted Dr. Sinclair privately in the smoking room. The physician's alibi, cigar with Raj on the covered terrace, began to fray. A waiter had seen him re-enter the ballroom alone shortly before the scream. Sinclair protested, voice rising. Sweat glistened on his brow, despite the room's chill draft. For the first time, his calm cracked like thin ice. Mind this performance of outraged innocence, Poirot noted to you. It falters. The body knows what the mouth denies. Poirot paced slowly before the rain-lashed windows, the grandfather clock chiming another quarter hour. The first real fracture had appeared. Not in the evidence alone, but in performance. Someone had forgotten a line, or spoken one too many times. The tension rises, he whispered. The spotlight of truth moves closer. On whom will it fall next? The first act concluded, and some masks had cracked. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. By early afternoon, the monsoon had settled into a steady, oppressive roar. Inside the Victoria Hotel, the drawing room felt smaller, warmer, almost suffocating. The scent of wood smoke from the fire mingled with the sharp aroma of fresh coffee and the faint sweetness of liqueur someone had poured to steady nerves. Velvet curtains had been drawn tighter against the rain-lashed windows. The grandfather clock chimed with slow, deliberate strokes, each one sounding like a warning. Hercule Poirot decided the moment had come to apply pressure. He gathered the suspects once more in the long lounge, now the central stage, where crystal decanters caught the lamplight, and crisp linen napkins lay untouched beside half-empty glasses. He stood at the head of the room, like a director preparing to call notes after a disastrous dress rehearsal. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, voice calm yet carrying. The first act has ended. Some performances were convincing, others less so. Now we test the scripts. He turned first to Lady Amelia Thorne. She sat very straight in a high-backed chair, silk afternoon dress, rustling faintly whenever she shifted. Poirot repeated her alibi. Retired early with headache, never left her room, Then he produced Raj's quiet testimony. Raj had brought her a fresh glass of champagne at 11:30, and she had accepted it with perfect composure, no sign of illness. Lady Amelia's lips thinned. "Oh, I took the powder after the champagne," she said. But her voice rose a fraction. Her fingers gripped the arm of the chair until the knuckles showed white against the smooth leather upholstery. "Observe," Poirot murmured to you, the listener. The performance strains. The line is repeated, yet the conviction weakens. Truth needs no repetition. Lies must be rehearsed again and again. He moved to Mr. Vikram Kapoor. The business partner had grown visibly paler since morning. Poirot laid before him a small stack of telegrams, copies obtained by Inspector Singh from the Bombay office. They spoke of urgent disputes. Thorne had been quietly diverting profits, blaming the old flood disaster on Kapoor's family management. Motive clear as day. Kapoor protested. "Those are misunderstandings, old business matters." Yet sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the room's chill draft from the terrace doors. His rough tweed jacket seemed suddenly too heavy. He tugged at the collar as though it choked him. "Bravo," Poirot said softly after Kapoor sat down again. But unconvincing. "Ask yourself, mon ami, why does this man of supposed loyalty avoid looking at the portrait of his former partner? The eyes betray what the mouth denies." Miss Elena Thorne came next. Poirot spoke gently at first, then sharper. A housemaid had heard light footsteps, women's footsteps, on the parquet corridor leading from Elena's room towards the ballroom at the critical hour. Elena shook her head violently. Her kid gloves twisted tighter in her lap until the soft leather creaked. "I was reading," she insisted. "I never left my room." But her voice cracked on the last word. Genuine tears appeared for the first time. Not rehearsed, not controlled. Poirot noted them silently. "This one begins to forget her lines," he whispered to you. "The script falters when real feeling intrudes." Dr. Harold Sinclair maintained his professional mask longest. He repeated the terrace cigar alibi with calm precision. Poirot countered with new detail. The waiter had seen him slip back into the ballroom alone, carrying something small in his hand. Sinclair's drumming fingers froze mid-motion. His sandalwood cologne suddenly seemed too strong in the close air. "You accuse me because of old grievances," he demanded. Poirot merely tilted his egg-shaped head. "The medical knowledge, the access to the vial, the glove of your size found beneath the table. And these are not grievances, doctor. These are cues you failed to hide." Finally, Poirot turned to Raj. The butler stood near the sideboard, hands folded, face impassive. Poirot spoke quietly of overheard arguments. Thorne blaming Raj publicly for the flood deaths, threatening to dismiss him without pension after years of service. Raj's steady gaze flickered once, very briefly. "You served the medicine tray," Poirot said. "You knew exactly where the vial stood." "I served faithfully," Raj answered. Now but the words came slower than before. His fingers brushed the silver tray behind him, as though seeking support. "Every actor has a secret," Poirot confided to you. "This one's helpfulness performs too perfectly over something darker. The body cannot lie forever." The room grew quieter as accusations circled. Silk rustled uncomfortably. Champagne glasses stood forgotten, their contents growing warm. The fire crackled like soft applause for no one. Poirot paced once before the group, with small hands making an expressive gesture. "The rehearsed lines, they begin to falter," he said. One by one, the scripts fail. Truth requires no rehearsal. It simply is. He let silence fall, heavy as the rain outside. No one spoke. No one dared meet anyone else's eyes. The tension had thickened to breaking point. Somewhere, someone's mask was cracking wider with every heartbeat. Rehearsed lines began to falter. Truth needed no rehearsal. Now, Chapter 5. The mask slips. The afternoon wore on, and the floodwaters crept higher still, turning the hotel gardens into a dark, silent lake that reflected the grey sky. Inside the Victoria Hotel, the dining room had become the new center of gravity. Long mahogany table polished to a mirror sheen. Crystal glasses catching the flicker of the chandelier. The air thick with the scent of wilting lilies. Strong coffee gone cold, and the faint metallic bite of nervous sweat made the fire in the grate crackle steadily, throwing warm light across faces that no longer pretended calm. Hercule Poirot had decided the time for gentle probing was over. He summoned every suspect to the dining room and closed the double doors with a soft, final click. Rain hammered the tall windows like an impatient audience demanding the truth. He stood at the head of the table, small hands resting lightly on the back of a chair, green eyes moving from face to face. Mesdames and messieurs, he began quietly, we have reached the moment when masks become too heavy to wear. One of you will drop yours completely before this scene ends. He turned first to Miss Eleanor Thorne. She sat at the far end, kid gloves discarded for once, fingers laced so tightly the knuckles showed white. My Poirot placed before her a charred fragment of envelope retrieved from the library grate. Enough remained to show her father's handwriting and the words, your mother, flood, responsibility. Miss Eleanor, Poirot said gently, you told me you knew nothing of private letters. Yet this one speaks of your mother's death in the great monsoon flood 10 years ago, the flood Sir Reginald neglected to prevent. You blame him. You have blamed him for a decade. Eleanor's lips trembled. He destroyed her, she whispered. He let the workers die and blamed everyone else. My mother was there that day, visiting the mill school. She drowned because he refused to reinforce the walls. Tears came then, real, hot, unstoppable. Mascara streaked down her cheeks. Her shoulders shook with sobs that had been locked away far too long. The performance of cool indifference shattered like the crystal tumbler beside her father's body. Poirot regarded her with compassion, yet did not soften his voice. The mask has fallen, he said softly to you, the listener. Beneath it, the true face at last. You watch with Poirot, no? You see the tremble that was never there before. This is not rehearsal. This is truth breaking through. He let the silence stretch, then moved to the next fracture. He addressed Lady Amelia next. Madame, you played grief with such artistry. Yet when your stepdaughter weeps for her mother, you show relief. Why? Lady Amelia stiffened. I loved my husband, she insisted. But her voice lacked conviction. Her dry handkerchief lay forgotten in her lap. Poirot produced a small bottle, identical to the poison vial. This was found in your dressing case, refilled with the same bitter medicine your husband took. You knew his routine. You knew the dose that would kill. Amelia's composure cracked. I only wanted him to sleep, to stop the arguments. Her words trailed into a whisper, all not confession, yet, but the first real fracture in her polished facade. The room grew hotter despite the chill seeping from the windows. Silk rustled uncomfortably, chairs creaked as bodies shifted. Mr. Kapoor stared at the table. Dr. Sinclair's fingers drummed once, then stilled forever. Raj stood motionless near the sideboard, eyes fixed on nothing. Poirot circled the table slowly. "Consider the psychology," he said to you. "If you carried a decade of hate masked as loyalty, how would you perform innocence? Would your hand shake? Would your eyes avoid the face of the man you blamed for everything?" He stopped behind Raj. "And you, my friend," Poirot continued, voice almost kind. "You served the medicine tray every evening. You knew exactly where the vial stood. You heard Sir Reginald blame you, publicly, for the flood deaths that took your own family. You smiled, you bowed, you performed devotion. But the body remembers." Raj's shoulders sagged, just a fraction, and no denial came, only silence. Dr. Sinclair tried one last defense. "This is outrageous. I had no access." Poirot cut him off with a small, expressive gesture. "The glove, doctor. Your size. Your cologne still lingers on it. You returned to the ballroom alone. You had motive, means, opportunity, yet even you begin to crack." The confrontation swirled like the storm outside. Accusations overlapped. Denials grew thinner. Genuine emotion, anger, grief, fear began to leak through every rehearsed line. Lady Helena sobbed openly now. Lady Amelia's hands shook as she reached for a glass of water and missed. Kapoor muttered something inaudible in his native tongue. Sinclair's calm finally splintered into hoarse protest. Raj remained still, yet the stillness itself had changed, less rigid, more defeated. Poirot stepped back, letting the raw feeling fill the room. "The mask had fallen," he said quietly to you. "Not just one, several. Beneath them all, the true faces emerge at last. A guilt no longer performs innocence. Hate no longer performs loyalty. The spotlight burns away the costume." He looked around the table once more. "Someone here directed this tragedy," he said, "and very soon that someone will stand alone in the light." The rain thundered approval against the glass. No one moved, no one spoke. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the Curtain. As evening fell, the flood had reached its peak. Water pressed against the Victoria Hotel's lower windows like dark, patient fingers, sealing every exit and turning the grand building into a floating stage lit only by lamps and firelight. Inside the library, the air felt closer, thick with the scent of old leather bindings, wood smoke curling lazily from the hearth, and the sharp continental bite of fresh coffee someone had brewed to keep awake. Velvet curtains had been drawn against the storm. The grandfather clock ticked steadily, counting down to revelations no one could any longer avoid. Hercule Poirot had chosen this quieter room for the next phase. He invited the suspects one by one, not for accusation yet, but to draw back the curtain on the hidden connections that had shaped this tragedy. First came Mr. Vikram Kapoor. He sat heavily in a wing chair, tweed jacket creased from hours of tension. Poirot placed before him yellowed newspaper clippings from 10 years earlier, headlines screaming of the mill flood disaster, workers drowned because safety barriers had never been reinforced. Among the names listed as lost, Kapoor's own elder brother and father. "You never spoke of this," Poirot said gently, yet Sir Reginald knew. He blamed careless local management, in every statement. Your family carried the shame while he carried the profits. Kapoor's voice was low. I stayed close to him to wait for justice. I thought, one day, he would admit it. His hands, usually so controlled, trembled now on the armrest. And next Poirot summoned Dr. Harold Sinclair. The physician's sandalwood cologne arrived before he did, sharp against the wilting lilies on the mantel. Poirot showed him old correspondence. Letters proving Sinclair had warned Thorne about structural weaknesses at the mill school, warnings ignored, then used against him when the disaster came. Thorne had blacklisted him from every major hospital in Bombay. You lost your career, Poirot observed. You lost your reputation. And yet you accepted his invitation to this weekend. Why? Sinclair's jaw worked. To confront him, to make him say it aloud. I never intended. He stopped, eyes fixed on the fire. Miss Helena Thorne entered last among the family. She no longer wore gloves. Her hands lay bare and raw in her lap. Poirot spoke softly of the half-burned letter. Her father's confession, written in a moment of guilt, admitting his negligence, had cost her mother's life during that school visit. You loved your mother, Poirot said. You hated the man who let her drown, yet you stayed under his roof, played the dutiful daughter. Why? Helena's voice broke. Because I wanted him to see me every day, to remember, to feel it. Tears came again, quiet now, exhausted. Finally, Raj. The butler stood near the bookshelves, posture still impeccable, yet something in his eyes had changed, less guarded, more weary. Poirot spoke without flourish. Your wife and son were among the drowned. Sir Reginald blamed you publicly in the inquiry, called you negligent so he could escape responsibility. You served him faithfully for 10 years afterward. You smiled, you bowed, you poured his medicine. Why? Raj looked at the fire for a long moment. To be close enough to watch him live with it, to wait for the day he broke. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. I waited too long. Poirot stepped back, letting the connections settle like dust after a curtain is drawn. And behind every elegant facade in this hotel lay a backstage of pain. Greed had performed as ambition, resentment as loyalty, grief as indifference. The flood outside had merely mirrored the flood within, old wounds reopened by pressure, secrets spilling like water through cracked walls. In reflection, Poirot considered the nature of hidden motives. Humans are consummate actors because society demands it. Show strength, show loyalty, show composure. Never show the wound. Yet every mask is heavy. A guilt presses hardest of all. It forces the performer to over-rehearse, to watch every gesture, until the strain shows in the smallest tells. The too steady hand, the averted eye, the smile held 1 second too long. He remembered another case, the murder on the Orient Express. There too, a group had worn perfect masks of coincidence and civility. Each passenger performed innocence flawlessly. Shared meals, polite conversation, alibis overlapping like rehearsed lines. Nay, yet the little grey cells had seen the pattern. Too much harmony, too little natural friction. When the curtain was finally torn aside, 12 people stood revealed, not as strangers, but as a conspiracy bound by shared vengeance for a child's death. Motive had united them. Performance had almost saved them. But performance exhausts. Truth does not tire. In the end, the masks fell because the actors could no longer bear their weight. Here in Mumbai, the same principle held. Motives had festered behind curtains of politeness and duty. Revenge had disguised itself as service, as partnership, as daughterly devotion. Yet the psychology remains constant. No one can play a false role forever without the body rebelling. A tremor, a glance, a moment of genuine feeling. These are the leaks through which truth seeps. Theatrical wisdom, mon ami, Poirot murmured to you. Watch always for the unspoken lines, the ones no script contains. And they are the truest dialogue of all. He looked around the shadowed library one last time. The fire snapped, rain drummed, the clock ticked onward. We approach the final act, he said quietly. The spotlight narrows. Have you too begun to see the true performer among them? Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The final act night had fully claimed Mumbai. The floodwaters outside the Victoria Hotel had stilled into an eerie black mirror, reflecting the hotel's glowing windows like footlights on a darkened stage. Inside the grand ballroom, the very place where Sir Reginald Thorne had met his end, the air was thick with the scent of wood smoke, wilting roses, and the sharp residue of strong coffee long gone cold. Velvet curtains hung heavy and motionless. The crystal chandelier overhead tinkled faintly whenever someone shifted in their seat. Every suspect had been summoned here. No one could leave, and the cast was assembled for the final scene. Hercule Poirot stood alone in the center of the floor, small and precise, his green eyes gleaming under the soft lamplight. He drew himself up to full, though modest, height, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and spoke in a voice that carried without effort. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, you have each performed for Hercule Poirot, some truthfully, some not. The time has come to review the performances, and let us see who played their role to perfection, and who forgot their lines at the most dangerous moment. He turned first to Lady Amelia Thorne. She sat rigid in a high-backed chair, silk gown pooling around her like spilled ink. Lady Amelia, you played the grieving widow with admirable technique. The handkerchief dabbed at dry eyes. The shoulders shook on cue. Yet the grief was costume, not feeling. You knew of the poison vials tampering days before. Your own bottle, refilled and waiting. And the maid saw you enter the ballroom late, after claiming headache and retirement. Your performance was flawless, except for one detail. A wife truly devastated weeps real tears. Yours never fell. Amelia's lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands clutched the arms of the chair until the knuckles blanched. Poirot moved to Mr. Vikram Kapoor. You, sir, performed the loyal friend and partner. Warm words, firm handshakes, memories of shared dreams. But loyalty does not hide telegrams proving embezzlement. Loyalty does not wait 10 years to avenge a brother and father drowned because Sir Reginald refused safety repairs. You stayed close, not from friendship, but from hate wearing the mask of partnership. Kapoor stared at the parquet floor. His tweed jacket seemed suddenly too large for his shrinking frame. Poirot turned to Miss Eleanor Thorne. Miss Eleanor, your role was the innocent, grieving daughter. Resentful, perhaps, but harmless. And yet resentful daughters do not secretly burn letters that expose their father's guilt. You forged a duplicate to plant suspicion elsewhere. Your breakdown earlier was genuine. Love for your mother, hate for the man who let her die. But murder, no. Your performance cracked because your heart was never fully in the lie. Eleanor lifted her head. Tears still streaked her face, but she met Poirot's gaze steadily for the first time. Next came Dr. Harold Sinclair. Doctor, you gave the role of the wronged professional, calm, dignified, wronged by old injustice, magnifique in its restraint. Yet wronged men do not carry gloves matching the one found beneath the table. Wronged men do not slip back into the ballroom alone with something small concealed in the hand. Your medical knowledge selected the poison. Your bitterness chose the moment. Sinclair opened his mouth to protest. Poirot raised one small hand. Silence, please. The performance ends now. Finally, Poirot faced Raj. The butler stood near the sideboard where he had so often arranged trays. His posture remained perfect, yet something vital had gone out of it, like a marionette whose strings had slackened. And you, Raj? Poirot said quietly, almost with sorrow. You gave the most convincing performance of all. The loyal servant, the invisible man, the helpful shadow who never complained. Shock on your face when the body was discovered. The outrage when accusations flew. Helpful cooperation at every turn. Magnifique. He paused. The chandelier tinkled once, softly, as though the room itself held its breath. But you made one small error. One moment when the mask slipped completely. Poirot stepped closer. When I first questioned you about the medicine tray, your hands were too steady. A man truly surprised by murder trembles, even slightly, when handling the very vial that killed. Yours did not, because you had rehearsed that moment in your mind for 10 years. You knew exactly when and how the poison would enter the glass. You blamed Sir Reginald publicly for your wife and son's deaths in the flood. He never apologized. He never atoned. So you served him faithfully, until the night you served him death. Raj looked up. No denial, no protest. Only a long, slow exhale, as though a weight carried for a decade had finally dropped. The performance is over, Poirot said, a voice ringing clear in the silent ballroom. The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow. He turned to Inspector Singh, who had waited in the shadows near the door. Inspector, the murderer stands before you. Raj, the faithful butler, who waited 10 years to balance the scales. The inspector stepped forward. Handcuffs clicked softly, small metallic sounds that echoed louder than thunder. No one applauded. No one moved. The rain outside had eased to a gentle patter, and as though the storm itself had witnessed the end and approved. The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The ballroom of the Victoria Hotel felt suddenly larger and emptier once Raj had been led away. The handcuffs had clicked with a small final sound, metallic and untheatrical, echoing off the parquet floor like the last note of a play that had run too long. Inspector Singh spoke quietly to his men near the double doors, but the storm outside had eased to a soft, steady drizzle that tapped against the tall windows as though the sky itself were applauding in muted relief. Inside, the air still carried traces of wood smoke, wilting lilies, and the bitter ghost of spilled medicine, but the heavy tension had lifted like a curtain rising after the final bow. No one applauded. There was no curtain call in the usual sense, only the slow, stunned dispersal of players who had suddenly discovered their roles were finished. A Lady Amelia Thorne remained seated longest, her silk gown, once so perfectly arranged, now seemed slightly askew. The dry handkerchief she had clutched all evening lay crumpled in her lap. When she finally stood, her movements were careful, almost fragile. She looked at no one, least of all at the empty armchair where her husband had died. Instead, she walked to the tall window and stared out at the receding floodwaters. For the first time since the body was discovered, her face showed something genuine, not grief, not relief exactly, but the quiet recognition that a long, exhausting performance had ended. She would return to England soon, Poirot knew, perhaps to a quiet house in the countryside, perhaps to reinvent herself without the weight of Sir Reginald's shadow. The mask of the perfect society wife had cracked irreparably. What remained beneath was still forming. Miss Elena Thorne stood near the fireplace, her arms wrapped around herself, as though cold despite the lingering warmth of the embers. Her mascara had dried in faint streaks down her cheeks. She made no attempt to repair it. When Mr. Vikram Kapoor approached her, hesitant, almost shy, she did not pull away. He spoke in a low voice. She nodded once, twice. Something unspoken passed between them. Shared loss, shared blame, shared survival. In the days that followed, Poirot would learn they planned to leave Mumbai together, not in haste or scandal, but quietly, to build something new far from the mills and the memories. The role of resentful daughter had dissolved. What emerged was a woman ready, at last, to stop performing grief. Dr. Harold Sinclair paced once, twice, near the sideboard, then stopped. His sandalwood cologne lingered faintly, but the confident stride had gone. He had not been the murderer, yet the glove and the old bitterness had stained him. Inspector Singh questioned him briefly. No charges would be brought, so Sinclair would leave the hotel at first light, return to his diminished practice, perhaps attempt to rebuild the reputation Sir Reginald had destroyed. The performance of wronged innocence had been stripped away. What remained was a man who would have to learn to live without masks of any kind. Raj himself had said almost nothing after the accusation. He allowed the handcuffs without resistance. His face, usually so composed, showed only a profound weariness, and as he was led toward the service stairs, still the servant's path, even in arrest, he paused once and looked back at Poirot. No words, only a small nod, almost respectful. Revenge had sustained him for 10 years. Now that it was done, the emptiness was immediate and total. Justice would take its course, trial, prison, perhaps execution. But the true punishment had already begun inside him. Poirot stood apart, watching each transformation unfold. He touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully, and then made an expressive gesture with his small hands as though directing the final exits. "You see it now, mon ami," he murmured to you, the listener. "The spotlight of truth has shone. No more rehearsals, no more scripts, only the raw faces of people who must begin again." The inspector approached him last. "Monsieur Poirot, your work here is finished. We will handle the formalities." Poirot inclined his head. "Merci, Inspector. The performance is concluded. Justice, she takes her bow at last." One by one, the suspects drifted from the ballroom. Footsteps echoed softly on the parquet, some hurried, some slow, some uncertain. Doors opened and closed with gentle clicks. Silk rustled one final time. Crystal glasses stood untouched, their contents growing warm and flat. Outside, the rain had almost stopped. A sliver of moonlight broke through the clouds, touching the flooded gardens with pale silver. The hotel, once a sealed theater of deception, began to breathe again. Poirot remained in the center of the ballroom a moment longer. He arranged 3 small objects on a side table: a napkin, a spoon, a fallen rose petal, into perfect symmetry. Then he turned and walked toward the lobby, footsteps measured and calm. The curtain call had come. No applause followed. Only the quiet, inexorable arrival of justice. Chapter 9. After the show, morning light finally broke through the clouds over Mumbai. The floodwaters had begun their slow retreat, leaving behind muddy streaks on the marble steps of the Victoria Hotel, and a quiet that felt almost reverent after days of relentless rain. Inside, the grand lobby smelled freshly of furniture wax and coffee. Strong, continental, brewed anew as though the building itself wished to wash away the scent of tragedy. The crystal chandeliers caught the pale sun and threw soft prisms across polished floors. Velvet curtains had been drawn back, letting in air that carried the clean, a wet earth promise of renewal. The theater of crime had emptied. The actors had left the stage, one by one, carrying their transformed selves into whatever came next. Lady Amelia Thorne departed first, just after dawn. A sleek black car waited at the porte-cochere. Her silk traveling coat rustled softly as she stepped inside without looking back. No dramatic farewell. No tears for the cameras of society reporters who had begun to gather outside the cordon, and she had spent the night alone in the suite she once shared with Sir Reginald, sorting papers, burning old letters, deciding what to keep and what to let the monsoon take. When she emerged, her posture was straighter. Not the rigid performance of the perfect wife, but something quieter, more honest. She would return to a small estate in Sussex, far from empire building and whispered scandals. There, perhaps, she would learn to live without the mask of composure she had worn so long, it had become her face. Justice had not punished her directly, yet the truth had stripped her bare. In its place grew the possibility of a life chosen, not rehearsed. Miss Elena Thorne and Mr. Vikram Kapoor left together later that morning. They carried only small cases. The rest would follow by train. Elena's eyes were still red-rimmed, but the raw grief had softened into something gentler. Acceptance, perhaps, or the first tentative steps toward forgiveness. Kapoor walked beside her, no longer the stiff partner in tweed, but a man who had finally spoken his family's pain aloud. They planned to travel north to the hills, Simla first, then perhaps further, away from the mills and the ghosts of the flood. There they would begin something new. Not a grand romance played for society, but a quiet partnership built on shared scars. Elena no longer needed to perform resentment. D. Kapoor no longer needed to perform loyalty. The masks had fallen, and what remained felt fragile but real. Dr. Harold Sinclair checked out quietly at the reception desk. His medical bag, now searched and cleared, rested at his feet while he settled the bill. The sandalwood cologne lingered faintly as he passed through the lobby, but the confident stride had gone. He would return to his modest clinic in Bombay's quieter quarters. No charges had been filed against him, and the glove and the old bitterness were not enough for court. Yet the weekend had forced him to confront the role he had played. The wronged man, nursing resentment instead of healing. He paused once at the doorway, looked back at the ballroom doors now closed and silent, then stepped into the sunlight. Perhaps he would write to old colleagues, seek reinstatement, rebuild slowly. The performance of outraged innocence had ended. What began was the harder work of living without excuses. Raj's departure was the most final. He had been taken to the central jail the night before, handcuffed and silent. The hotel staff, those who had worked beside him for years, spoke of him in hushed tones, always polite, always precise, always invisible until the end. His room in the servants' quarters stood empty now, bed made with military neatness. A single photograph of his lost wife and son left on the dresser. Justice would move slowly, trial, evidence, my sentence. But the true verdict had already been delivered in the ballroom. Revenge had sustained him. Its completion left only emptiness. The mask of the faithful servant had been the heaviest of all. Hercule Poirot remained until mid-morning. He breakfasted alone in the now quiet dining room, strong coffee, crisp linen napkin, a single sweet biscuit. He arranged the sugar cubes in perfect symmetry on the saucer, then sat back and watched the light move across the table. The hotel staff moved around him with careful respect. Guests who had been mere background players during the drama now whispered his name with awe. He rose at last, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and stepped out onto the terrace. The air was cooler, fresher. Puddles reflected a sky turning blue. He looked across the receding water to the city beyond, already stirring back to life, already forgetting. The theater has emptied, he murmured to you, the listener, as the actors have gone home, carrying their new faces. Some will heal, some will struggle. All have been changed by truth. He tilted his egg-shaped head, green eyes thoughtful. Ask yourself, mon ami, when the curtain falls on your own small performances, what face will remain? The one you rehearsed, or the one you hid? The lessons of this flooded stage would linger long after the last guest had left. Masks had been torn away. What grew in their place was uncertain, imperfect, human, and the theater emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. Several weeks had passed since the Monsoon released its grip on Mumbai. Hercule Poirot had returned to his quiet apartment in Brussels, a small, orderly space where everything had its place and nothing was ever out of symmetry. Late afternoon light filtered through lace curtains, touching the polished mahogany table, where a steaming cup of tisane sat beside a single porcelain saucer. Another herbal aroma rose gently, mingling with the faint scent of furniture, wax, and the distant chime of a church bell. Poirot sat in his favorite armchair, small hands folded, egg-shaped head tilted thoughtfully, as he reviewed the newspaper clipping that had arrived that morning from Bombay. The headline was modest. Mill disaster. Butler sentenced for poisoning industrialist. Raj had received life imprisonment. Justice, measured and calm, had taken its course. Lady Amelia had sailed for England, and Eleanor and Vikram Kapoor had quietly married in a small hill station ceremony far from the city's gaze. Dr. Sinclair had begun corresponding with medical societies, seeking to restore his name. The Victoria Hotel had reopened its doors, polished and pristine, as though no tragedy had ever stained its marble floors. Poirot set the clipping aside and sipped his tisane, letting the warmth settle. Then he spoke, as though addressing an old friend across the room. Mon ami, he began softly to you, the listener. Sit with Poirot a moment. Let us review this little drama together, as one reviews a performance after the house lights rise. Why do people perform rather than reveal the truth? Society is the greatest director of all. It hands out roles at birth and demands they be played without deviation. Show strength, show loyalty, show composure. Never show the wound, never show the hate, never show the fear. In Mumbai's flooded theatre, every suspect had accepted a part: the grieving widow, and the loyal partner, the dutiful daughter, the wronged physician, the faithful servant. Each mask was chosen for protection: protection from judgment, from pain, from the unbearable weight of honesty. Yet masks are heavy. Guilt is the heaviest burden of all. It forces the actor to rehearse endlessly, every gesture measured, every word weighed, every glance controlled. The body, however, is a poor liar. It trembles when the mind insists on calm. It sweats when the mouth smiles. It forgets to breathe when the heart races. Raj's hands had been too steady when he spoke of the medicine tray. Lady Amelia's handkerchief had remained perfectly dry. Eleanor's tears had come only when the script failed her. These were not accidents. These were the leaks through which truth always seeps. Poirot's mind drifted to another case, long ago, in the quiet village of Styles. There, too, a poisoner had performed innocence with chilling precision. Or the Inglethorpe had played the devoted wife. Tender words, gentle touches, tears at exactly the right moment. She had rehearsed her grief before mirrors, practiced the catch in her voice, the flutter of lashes. Yet one small detail betrayed her. When the body was discovered, she reached for her husband's cigarette case with fingers that never shook. A truly shocked woman drops things, fumbles, trembles. The body knows the truth, even when the face composes itself into perfect sorrow. And in the end, she had confessed, not because of fingerprints or witnesses alone, but because the performance had exhausted her soul. The little grey cells had seen what others missed: the psychology beneath the costume. So it had been in Mumbai. Revenge had worn the mask of service for 10 long years. Raj had poured tea, arranged trays, bowed, smiled, while inside the wound festered. The flood of 1916 had taken his family. Sir Reginald had taken his dignity by blaming him publicly, and 10 years of performance had built a cage around the truth. When the moment came, the poison was administered with the same calm precision Raj had used to fold napkins. But the strain of a decade-long lie had left its mark: the too steady hands, the too perfect composure. Truth does not need rehearsal. Lies always do. The psychology of revelation is simple yet profound. People cling to masks because they fear what lies beneath: ugliness, weakness, shame. Yet when the curtain is torn aside, or when the spotlight burns too brightly, the relief is immediate. Confession is not always punishment. Sometimes it is release. Raj had not protested in the ballroom because the weight had finally lifted. Eleanor had wept because she no longer needed to pretend indifference. Even Lady Amelia, in her quiet departure, had begun the slow work of becoming herself again. Truth triumphs over performance because performance is finite. It tires the actor, strains the voice, exhausts the will. And truth is patient. It waits in the wings until the curtain must fall. In every human drama, whether on a luxury liner, in a country house, or in a flooded hotel, the same play is staged: masks versus reality. And always, always, reality wins. Poirot set the empty tisane cup down with precision, aligning it perfectly with the saucer. So ends another theatre of crime, he said quietly. The actors have gone home. Some will heal. Some will carry new scars. All have learned that the mask, once removed, cannot easily be replaced. He rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the soft Brussels twilight. Until the next theatre of crime calls, mes amis, he murmured, a small smile touching his lips. Poirot will be watching. The performance was over. The stage was dark. Only truth remained, quiet and eternal,